The death of the Duke. Europe stood at the edge of a new century, a century that promised progress, invention, and industry. Yet beneath the polished surface of its grand empires, the ground was already cracking. And nowhere were the cracks deeper than in Austro-Hungary, an empire vast, powerful on paper, but fragile at its very core. And the question is, who really killed the Archduke? Welcome back to the historical true crime, as we bring you all the historical tea. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and tell us by the end of this video who is really behind this mystery death. Most of you are not subscribing to this channel. WHYY, please subscribe. Who really killed the Archduke? A fragile empire. Slow pan across archival photographs of Vienna in 1914. Horse-drawn carriages clattering over cobblestones, grand palaces towering over narrow alleys, soldiers drilling in immaculate uniforms. Narrator, calm, ominous. Europe stood at the edge of a new century, a century that promised progress, invention, and industry. Yet beneath the polished surface of its grand empires, the ground was already cracking. And nowhere were the cracks deeper than in Austro-Hungary, an empire vast, powerful on paper, but fragile at its very core. The dual monarchy. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was a sprawling patchwork. Germans, Hungarians, Czechs, Slovaks, Croats, Italians, Jews, Poles, Romanians, and Serbs, more than a dozen peoples bound under one imperial crown. In theory, it was a partnership between Austria and Hungary. In reality, it was a family home full of restless tenants, each demanding their own key to the door. Animated map of the empire, showing different ethnic groups in clashing colors. For centuries, the Habsburg dynasty had ruled these lands. But by 1914, the empire was aging, creaking under the weight of modern nationalism. Industrialization was uneven, social tensions high, and in the Balkans, the empire's southern frontier, a fire smoldered. Enter Franz Ferdinand. Into this storm stepped Franz Ferdinand, nephew of the emperor and heir to the throne. He was no ordinary prince. Where others in the imperial court saw tradition, Franz Ferdinand dreamed of reform. He wanted to centralize power, modernize the army, and grant greater rights to the empire's Slavic subjects. To him, the future of Austria-Hungary depended on compromise. Photographs of Franz Ferdinand, stern-faced, with his wife Sophie and their children. But to the empire's ruling elite, compromise meant weakness. To Hungarian leaders, it meant losing their grip. And to the rising wave of nationalist radicals, even reform was not enough. They wanted independence, not compromise. The Balkan powder keg. Nowhere was this conflict sharper than in the Balkans. Serbia, a small kingdom to the south, had already fought its way free from Ottoman rule. Its people dreamed of creating a greater Serbia, uniting all South Slavs, including those still under Habsburg rule. To them, Franz Ferdinand's empire was not a home, but a prison. Crowds in Belgrade waving flags, soldiers returning from the Balkan Wars of 1912 to 1913. By 1914, Serbia's influence had grown after victories in the Balkan Wars. Austria-Hungary, humiliated and fearful, watched as Serbian nationalism crept across its borders like wildfire. The two nations were set on a collision course. And it was into this cauldron of tension that the Archduke would step, a symbolic visit. June 28, 1914, Franz Ferdinand traveled to Sarajevo, capital of Bosnia, a province the empire had annexed just 6 years earlier. To the Habsburgs, his visit was a demonstration of strength. To many Serbs, it was a slap in the face. Sarajevo's narrow streets, Ottoman bridges, and crowded bazaars. Overlay text. June 28, 1914. For on that day, Serbs remembered the Battle of Kosovo, a sacred anniversary of their struggle against foreign rule. To them, the Archduke's parade was not a celebration, but an insult. Tensions unseen. The empire's leaders hoped Franz Ferdinand's presence would calm unrest. show the people that Sarajevo was secure under Habsburg authority. But beneath the cheering crowds, darker forces stirred. Young men whispered in cafes. Bombs and pistols were smuggled across the border. And while the Archduke smiled for the cameras, fate itself was already taking aim. Visuals fade to black. A single heartbeat echoes. Narrator, in low tone, cliffhanger. The Austro-Hungarian Empire believed it was strong enough to endure, but history would prove otherwise. The empire's fate, and the Archduke's life, would soon rest in the trembling hands of a sickly young man with a pistol and a dream. Sarajevo, a city on edge. Archival footage and photographs of Sarajevo in the early 1900s. Narrow cobblestone streets, Ottoman-style bridges, trams rattling through marketplaces, a mix of minarets and church towers. Tension. Sarajevo, a city of crossroads. Here, East met West. Ottoman mosques stood beside Catholic cathedrals, Orthodox churches, and Jewish synagogues. In its streets, one could hear Turkish, German, and Serbian voices mingling in the same marketplace. But beneath the harmony lay tension. For Sarajevo was more than just a city. It was a symbol of empire, of rebellion, and of the future of the Balkans. June 28, 1914. On the morning of June 28th, the city stirred with anticipation. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was coming to inspect military exercises and tour the city with his beloved wife, Sophie. For the empire, it was a chance to showcase control. For many Bosnian Serbs, it was an insult, a parade of imperial power on one of their most sacred days. Calendar page turning to June 28th, crowd gathering on Sarajevo's Apel Quay near the river Miljacka. For June 28th was no ordinary date. It marked the anniversary of the Battle of Kosovo in 1389, a symbol of Serbian resistance against foreign domination. To Serb nationalists, the Archduke's presence was not a celebration, but a provocation. Whispers in the crowd. As the Archduke's motorcade prepared to set off, crowds lined the streets. Some waved flags, cheering politely. Others stood in silence, their eyes fixed, their thoughts elsewhere. Among them, hidden in plain sight, were 6 young men, conspirators who had smuggled pistols and bombs into the city. They blended into the crowd, waiting for their moment. Reenactment shots. A trembling hand clutching a small bomb wrapped in cloth, another concealing a revolver under a jacket. The motorcade. At 10 a.m., the Archduke's motorcade began its journey. Open-top cars carried officials, soldiers, and finally Franz Ferdinand and Sophie. They moved slowly along Apel Quay, past the river, past the onlookers, unaware of the eyes watching them with deadly intent. Period photos of the Archduke's actual motorcade. Dramatic pause. The assassins had scattered themselves along the route, ready to strike. Each one knew the risks. Each one was prepared to die. But fate, as it often does, had its own design. Suspicion in the air. Even before the motorcade rolled out, rumors of danger had reached the authorities. Sarajevo was restless, security was weak, and intelligence reports warned of possible threats. Yet precautions were minimal. The Archduke insisted on appearing open and approachable. After all, what better way to display imperial strength than a ride through the streets unguarded? Military officers adjusting their uniforms, glancing nervously into the crowd. But in truth, Sarajevo that morning was not just a city welcoming its future emperor. It was a city poised on a knife's edge. A brewing storm. The world beyond Sarajevo seemed peaceful enough. Europe was enjoying what some called the Belle Époque, the beautiful era. Paris dazzled with lights. London bustled with industry. Vienna glowed with music and art. But here in the Balkans, beneath the summer sun, the storm clouds of war were already gathering. Few realized it then. Fewer still imagined how far the thunder would travel. Juxtapose bright images of Paris and Vienna with dark, foreboding shots of Sarajevo's tense streets. The unseen hands, unseen by the cheering crowds, unseen even by the Archduke himself, forces far greater than any one man were converging. Nationalist movements, secret societies, rival empires, all had a stake in the fate of that day. Sarajevo was not just a stage for an imperial visit. It was a theater of destiny. And in the wings, history's actors were preparing to strike. Visuals fade to black. Heartbeat returns. The Archduke smiled, waving to the crowd. His wife, Sophie, sat beside him. They could not know that already the first assassin was raising his hand. The conspirators. Opening visuals. Dark reenactments. A smoky cafe in Belgrade. Young men hunched over wooden tables, whispering while passing pamphlets and photographs of the Archduke. They were young, restless, and burning with anger. To the world, they were nobodies, students, clerks, sons of peasants. But in their hearts, they believed themselves destined to strike a blow so great it would shake an empire. They called themselves Young Bosnia, and among them stood a frail, sickly boy named Gavrilo Princip. Gavrilo Princip, born in 1894 in a poor Bosnian village. Gavrilo Princip grew up in hardship. Small, pale, and often ill, he looked far younger than his years. Yet behind his weak body burned a fierce determination. Princip devoured nationalist poetry and revolutionary tracts, dreaming of freedom for his people. He believed Austro-Hungary was a prison, and he longed to break its chains. Black and white photos of Princip, gaunt, hollow-eyed. He was not alone. Like many young men of his generation, Princip was drawn to the vision of a greater Serbia, a South Slav nation free of foreign masters. And in the taverns and cafes of Belgrade, he found others who shared his dream. Young Bosnia. Young Bosnia was not a single organization, but a movement of students, intellectuals, and radicals united by their hatred of Austrian rule. They spoke of revolution, read forbidden books, and idolized martyrs who had died for freedom. Most were no older than 20. Few had any real military training. But they had passion, courage, and, most dangerously, connections. Sketches of the conspirators, Nedeljko Kabranovic, Trifko Grabez, and others. Through a web of contacts, young Bosnia reached the ears of the Black Hand, a secret society within Serbia's military, led by men who saw assassination as a weapon of politics. The Black Hand. Officially, it was called unification or death. But to history, it is remembered simply as the Black Hand. Formed by Serbian army officers, it operated in the shadows, plotting sabotage, smuggling weapons, and orchestrating political killings. Its leader, Colonel Dragutin Dimitrijevic, known by the codename Apis, was ruthless, cunning, and deeply influential in Belgrade. Archival photo of Dimitrijevic, stern-faced, in uniform. A Black Hand emblem flashes across the screen. Did Apis and his Black Hand order the killing of Franz Ferdinand? Or did they merely encourage idealistic youths already bent on violence? The line between suggestion and command was blurred, and history would never fully untangle it. The assassin's training. What is certain is this. In the spring of 1914, several members of Young Bosnia were chosen for a mission. Their target, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, whose planned visit to Sarajevo provided the perfect opportunity. They were smuggled across the border, armed with pistols, bombs, and cyanide capsules to kill themselves if captured. Their training was crude, their commitment absolute. Close-ups of FN Model 1910 pistols, crude hand grenades, and small vials of poison. Low, deliberate. They were told that failure was not an option. The Archduke must die, even if it cost them their lives. A web of conspiracy. But here lies the mystery. Was this a mission born solely in the minds of idealistic students? Or was it engineered by higher powers? Some historians argue that Apis himself provided the weapons and ordered the strike. Others suggest the Serbian government turned a blind eye, unwilling to stop an act that could weaken their imperial rival. And still others claim that Austria-Hungary knew of the plot in advance and allowed it to unfold, to justify crushing Serbia once and for all. Split-screen images, Serbian officers in uniform, Austrian diplomats at banquets, Russian generals conferring in map rooms. In this web of whispers and shadows, the truth remains elusive. What is clear is that 6 young men carried their weapons into Sarajevo that June, and waited along the motorcade route. Each knew the odds were slim. Each knew they might die. Yet they stood ready, the calm before the storm. As the Archduke's motorcade prepared to roll through Sarajevo, Princip and his comrades took their positions. Some clutched bombs, others revolvers. Princip himself, weakened by tuberculosis, carried both resolve and despair. He believed he had nothing to lose and a nation to win. Slow zoom on Princip's hollow eyes. The Empire called them terrorists. Their friends called them heroes. But history would call them something else entirely: assassins. The first attempt. Sunlight floods Sarajevo streets. The Archduke's motorcade rolls forward, horses clopping in the distance, onlookers waving. Over this calm scene, the narrator's voice cuts in like a warning. Narrator, measured, tense. June 28, 1914. The plan was simple, yet perilous. 6 young men, scattered along a Appel Quay, would strike as the Archduke's motorcade passed. They carried pistols, bombs, and poison. If one failed, another would try. Success was not guaranteed, but bloodshed was. The motorcade rolls out. At 10 a.m., the procession began. The governor of Bosnia led in the first car. Behind him came Franz Ferdinand and Sophie, seated in the second, open-topped vehicle. The Archduke wore a military uniform, feathers in his cap. Sophie, elegant and calm, smiled to the crowd. Their appearance was meant to symbolize stability, strength, and confidence. But as the cars moved slowly along the river, danger lurked ahead. Black and white photos of the actual motorcade. Nedeljko Kabranovic. The first chance belonged to Nedeljko Kabranovic, a 19-year-old conspirator stationed along the route. As the Archduke's car approached, Kabranovic tightened his grip around a small bomb concealed in his coat. He raised his arm and hurled it toward the Archduke. Slow-motion reenactment. A dark cylinder sailing through the air. The device struck the folded-down hood of the Archduke's car and bounced off. Explosion in the crowd. Instead of killing its target, the bomb rolled onto the next car. A deafening explosion tore through the street. Metal fragments ripped into officers and bystanders. Blood spattered the cobblestones. The Archduke's car sped ahead, unscathed, leaving screams and smoke behind. Chaos in the crowd. Wounded soldiers carried away. The first attempt had failed, but it had not been harmless. 20 people were injured. The Archduke himself was shaken, yet alive. Kabranovic cast fate. In the chaos, Kabranovic swallowed his vial of cyanide and jumped into the river below. He intended to die a martyr. But fate was cruel. The poison was old and only made him sick. And the river was shallow, barely knee-deep. Pulled out by police and beaten by the furious crowd, Kabranovic was dragged away, alive. Reenactment, Kabranovic gagging, being pulled from the water. The conspirators' first strike had not only failed, it had alerted the authorities that others might be waiting. The Archduke's resolve. As the motorcade sped toward the town hall, the Archduke's face was pale but resolute. Sophie leaned close, whispering reassurance. At the hall, officials tried to calm him, offering speeches of loyalty. Franz Ferdinand interrupted, his voice sharp. "I come here on a visit, and I get bombs thrown at me. It is outrageous." Interior of Sarajevo Town Hall, officials looking nervous. Yet, despite the attack, the Archduke chose to continue his visit. He would not be seen as fearful or weak. His decision would prove fateful. The other assassins wait. Along Appel Quay, the other conspirators, including Gavrilo Princip, still waited. They had not moved, not acted, not drawn attention. They had seen Kabranovic fail, watched the car speed past, and felt despair. To them, the mission was over. The Archduke had survived, and their chance was lost. Princip leaning against a wall, lowering his head in frustration. But destiny had not finished its work. For even as Princip turned away in defeat, events elsewhere in the city would conspire to place him face to face with his target once more. The Archduke had survived the morning attack. The conspirators were scattered and demoralized. By all logic, history should have moved on. But in Sarajevo, chance and fate would soon collide with deadly precision. The fatal encounter. Opening visuals. Street-level shot of Sarajevo's Apelque. The sun is high. Dust swirls in the summer air. Crowds thin. The motorcade slows. Narrator, low, deliberate. One bomb had failed. The Archduke was alive. His assassins, scattered along the city's streets, believed their chance had passed. But history does not always follow logic. Sometimes it bends to coincidence or fate. A change of plans. After the attack at the town hall, Franz Ferdinand was visibly shaken but unbroken. He refused to cut short the visit. Instead, he insisted on traveling to the hospital to see those injured in the morning blast. Sophie, ever devoted, remained by his side. Security was warned, the motorcade reassembled. But in the chaos of the day, one crucial mistake was made. Officials arguing, a map of Sarajevo's streets. The drivers were not informed of change in route. Instead of turning toward the hospital, the lead car continued straight down Franz Joseph Street, a narrow lane that led directly past a small corner cafe. Princip's despair. Meanwhile, Gavrilo Princip sat outside that very cafe. The morning had ended in failure. His comrades were arrested or scattered. He felt despair, even shame. Perhaps, he thought, the cause was lost. He ordered a sandwich, steeling himself for disappointment. Then the sound of engines approached. Reenactment. Princip at a cafe table, head bowed, then raising his eyes at the noise. The impossible had happened. The Archduke's motorcade, confused and off course, turned into the street and slowed directly in front of him. The fatal moment. Slow, precise. The lead driver realized his mistake and tried to reverse. But the narrow street left no room. Car stalled, gears ground. The Archduke's vehicle came to a halt, just a few feet away from Gavrilo Princip. The open car, Sophie beside the Archduke, the driver struggling with the controls. Narrator, grim, steady. Princip stepped forward. From his pocket, he drew his pistol, a Belgian-made FN Model 1910. He raised it, steadied himself, and fired 2 shots. Sound effect, gunfire echoing. The Archduke and Sophie. Somber. The first bullet struck Sophie in the abdomen. She cried out, then collapsed across her husband's lap. The second tore into the Archduke's neck. Blood poured from his mouth as he gasped. Sophie, Sophie, don't die. Stay alive for our children. Reenactment. Silence but for Sophie's cry and the Archduke's words. Pausing low. But within minutes, both were gone. Chaos in the street. Panic erupted. Soldiers and police lunged at Princip. He tried to turn the gun on himself, but was overpowered. Beaten bloody, he was dragged away. The crowd screamed, some shouting in rage, others in disbelief. The heir to the Habsburg throne and his wife lay dying in the back of their car, while Sarajevo dissolved into chaos. Soldiers holding Princip down, the motorcade rushing away. A turning point in history. In that moment, Gavrilo Princip had done more than end 2 lives. He had shattered the delicate peace of Europe. The bullet that felled Franz Ferdinand would soon unleash armies across continents, toppling empires and drowning the world in blood. Slow fade from Sarajevo Street to battlefield trenches, artillery firing. But the story of Sarajevo does not end with a single gunshot. For behind Princip's trembling hand, questions remain. Who truly ordered the strike? Who supplied the weapons? And did great powers quietly watch, waiting for their excuse to ignite a war?